July 16th, 1945. 5:29 in the morning. Mountain wartime. Jornada del Muerto Desert, New Mexico. The journey of the dead man. That's what the Spanish called this place. 30 scientists huddled 100 feet below ground. Concrete bunker. Walls 3 feet thick. 10,000 yards from ground zero. Through welding goggles with multiple layers of dark glass, they watched a steel tower, 100 feet tall, silhouetted against the pre-dawn sky. In 90 seconds, that tower would cease to exist. Dr. Marcus Whitfield stood with his hand gripping a wooden post. 45 years old, Harvard physicist, director of this test. His knuckles were white. The tower held 10,000 pounds, a spherical device, plutonium core surrounded by conventional explosives, 32 detonation points, each requiring synchronization measured in nanoseconds. $2 billion, 130,000 people laboring in secret across the country. And it all came down to this. A steel tower in the middle of nowhere, holding a weapon that might fail completely, or might work too well. Marcus didn't know which possibility frightened him more. Through the thick glass of his goggles, he could see the tower swaying slightly in the desert wind, just half an inch of movement, well within tolerance, but still. 90 seconds, someone said behind him. Marcus closed his eyes. 18 months earlier, he had no idea if any of this would work. He still didn't. Early 1944, Cambridge, Massachusetts. Snow falling on Harvard Yard. Marcus Whitfield sat in his office on the 3rd floor of the physics building. Blackboard covered in equations, chalk dust on his hands, the familiar comfort of theory. He'd spent 20 years here, teaching, researching, publishing papers that maybe 36 people in the world could understand. His war contribution had been calculations, models, theoretical work supporting the Manhattan Project, safe work, important work, but abstract. Then Dr. Samuel Wright walked into his office without knocking. Wright was younger than Marcus by 5 years, brilliant, charismatic, the kind of man who could explain complex physics to generals and make them understand why it mattered. He'd become the theoretical leader of the entire Manhattan Project. "Marcus," Wright said, "we need to talk." Marcus set down his chalk. "We're going to test it," Wright said. "The gadget, the implosion device." Marcus nodded slowly. He knew about the gadget, had done calculations for it. Plutonium core, explosive lenses compressing it to critical mass in microseconds. Beautiful theory, terrifying reality. "When?" Marcus asked. 18 months, maybe less if we're lucky. "And you need—" "You," Wright said. "I need you to run the test." Marcus stared at him. "Sam, I'm a theorist. I work on blackboards. I don't—" "You're the best measurement physicist we have," Wright interrupted. "And this test is all about measurement." Wright walked to the window, looked out at the snow. "We've never detonated a nuclear device before, Marcus. Never. Not even a small one. We have no empirical data. Everything is theory." "I know. So when we test this, we need to know exactly what happens. Yield, temperature, shock wave velocity, radiation intensity, every detail. Because 3 weeks after this test, we're putting a bomb just like it on a plane and flying it to Japan." Wright turned back to face him. "If the test fails, we've wasted years of work and enormous resources. If the test succeeds, but we don't measure it properly, we're flying blind into combat." Marcus felt the weight of it settling on him. "There's a problem, though," he said quietly. "Several problems," Wright agreed. "How do you measure something that destroys your measuring equipment?" Wright smiled. It wasn't a happy smile. "That's why I need you." The paradox kept Marcus awake for weeks. Every measurement device would be vaporized, melted, obliterated within microseconds of detonation. Cameras couldn't survive temperatures hotter than the surface of the sun. Pressure sensors couldn't withstand shock waves traveling at 7,000 miles per hour. Radiation detectors would be consumed by the very radiation they were trying to measure. It was like trying to take a photograph of the inside of a furnace while standing inside the furnace, while the furnace exploded. Marcus filled notebook after notebook with calculations, sketches, failed ideas. He needed measurements at 3 critical moments. The first microsecond, when the chain reaction initiated, when plutonium atoms began splitting. The first millisecond, when the fireball formed, when the steel tower vaporized. The first full second, when the shock wave propagated, when the mushroom cloud began to rise. Each time frame required completely different technology that didn't exist yet. He'd have to invent it. In his office late one night, Marcus had a realization. He couldn't measure the explosion directly, that was impossible. But he could design instruments to capture data in the fraction of a second before destruction. Then transmit that data elsewhere, to recording equipment far enough away to survive. The instruments would die, but the data would live. Marcus started sketching furiously. Streak cameras, capable of capturing 10 million frames per second, positioned in underground bunkers, photographing through periscopes and mirrors extending up through the desert floor. The cameras themselves would be safe underground. The periscopes would be destroyed, but not before the cameras captured those first critical milliseconds. It could work. It had to work. By spring of 1944, Marcus had assembled a team, 8 engineers, specialists in optics, electronics, structural engineering. He also got army construction crews, men who knew how to build things in impossible places. And one more person, Lyle Brennan, 24 years old, fresh from MIT with a chemistry degree, top of his class, precise, detail-oriented, the kind of young man who checked everything 3 times. Marcus interviewed him in a temporary office in Los Alamos. Lyle sat straight-backed in his chair, serious expression. "Why do you want this assignment?" Marcus asked. "Because it matters, sir. It's dangerous." "I know. You could be working on theory, safe calculations, contributing from a distance." Lyle met his eyes. "My brother is a Marine, fighting in the Pacific. Every day this war continues, men like him are dying." He paused. "If I can help end it even one day sooner, I'll take any risk necessary." Marcus hired him on the spot. The location was chosen by summer, Jornada del Muerto Desert in southern New Mexico. Flat, remote, already government land from a bombing range. The Army designated a point on their maps, called it Ground Zero. First time that term was ever used. Marcus stood on that spot in August 1944. Nothing but sand and scrub brush stretching to the mountains. Heat shimmering off the desert floor. 110 degrees in the shade. Except there was no shade. He'd have to build the tower here. 100 feet tall, stable enough to hold 10,000 pounds without swaying, precise enough that instruments positioned around the device would be within millimeters of their calculated positions. On soft desert sand, in high winds, in extreme heat. Marcus was a theoretical physicist. He'd never supervised construction of anything larger than a laboratory bench. He felt profoundly unqualified. But the war didn't care about his qualifications. By September, materials started arriving. Steel beams, concrete, wooden pilings, cables, cameras, electronics. The construction crews arrived too, Army engineers, hard men with calloused hands. They looked at Marcus in his glasses and clean shirt, and he could see the question in their eyes. Does this professor know what he's doing? Marcus didn't, but he was going to learn. Meanwhile, another element of the project was taking shape, the jumbo. Marcus first heard about it in a meeting in October 1944. 214 tons of steel, a massive vessel designed to contain the plutonium core if something went wrong. The fear was simple. What if the conventional explosives detonated, but the nuclear reaction failed? A fizzle, 6 kilograms of weapons-grade plutonium scattered across the New Mexico desert, making the site unusable, wasting plutonium that had cost more than the entire steel production of some countries. The jumbo would prevent that. A steel container strong enough to survive the conventional explosion, to keep the plutonium intact for recovery. The engineering was extraordinary. The vessel had to contain pressures and temperatures beyond anything previously attempted. It took 6 months to build, $12 million. Transporting it from the factory to New Mexico required reinforcing bridges across 3 states. The weight was so extreme that standard roads couldn't handle it. Marcus watched it arrive in April 1945, hauled on a massive custom trailer. Dozens of men swarming around it. Dr. Wright stood next to him. "Impressive, isn't it?" Wright said. "Impressive and expensive," Marcus replied. Wright smiled. "We won't need it." Marcus looked at him. "The implosion design will work," Wright continued. "I'm confident." "We've never tested it." "I know, but the calculations are solid. The engineering is sound." Wright gestured at the jumbo. "That's an insurance policy we won't have to cash." Marcus wasn't so sure, but Wright made the decision. "Don't use the jumbo for containment. Instead, suspend it 800 yards from the tower. Use it as a test structure. See what survives at that distance." The confidence was either inspiring or terrifying. Marcus still wasn't sure which. By late May 1945, construction began in earnest. The tower foundation came first, wooden pilings, 20 of them, driven 20 feet into the desert floor through the soft sand until they hit harder substrate. The construction foreman was a man named Frank, 50-something, from Oklahoma. 3 decades of building bridges and buildings and things that had to stand up under stress. He didn't say much, but when he spoke, his crew listened. Marcus watched them work, the repetitive hammer of the pile driver, the precision of the measurements, 20 pilings positioned in an exact circle, spacing calculated to support 32 tons of tower and device. It was brutally hot. The men worked in shifts, drinking water constantly, pouring concrete at night when temperatures dropped below 100 degrees. The foundation had to be absolutely level. Any tilt would affect the symmetry of the instrument placement. Frank used surveying equipment borrowed from Texas oil drilling operations, precision instruments designed to map underground formations. He achieved levelness within 1/8 of an inch across the entire base. Marcus checked the measurements himself. Frank was right. Roy Henderson supervised the electrical work, 38 years old, from West Virginia. Coal miner for 15 years before the Army trained him as an electrician. He'd wired explosives 2,000 feet underground in darkness, worked with questionable electrical systems where one mistake meant men died. Marcus watched him work. Methodical, triple-checking every connection, every circuit. "You always this careful?" Marcus asked. Roy looked up from a cable junction. "In the mines, Doc, careful keeps you alive. Careless gets you buried." He went back to his work. "Same principle applies here, just the stakes are bigger." The tower itself went up in early June. Prefabricated steel, reinforced at every joint, doubled support cables. Standard towers were designed to flex in wind. This tower needed to be rigid, stable. Any vibration could affect the delicate instruments. By the end of June, the tower stood complete, 100 feet of steel reaching into the desert sky, the tallest structure for 50 miles. At the top, a platform, 10 feet by 10 feet, exactly, not arbitrary, calculated, just enough room for the device, the instruments, and the men who would assemble it. Marcus climbed the tower for the first time on July 1st. Steel ladder, rung by rung, his legs shaking by the time he reached the top. The view was extraordinary. Desert stretching in every direction, mountains on the horizon, the sky impossibly big. The wind was stronger up here, constant. The platform swayed just slightly under his feet, half an inch of movement, within tolerance. But standing on it, 100 feet in the air, that tolerance felt terrifyingly narrow. At the bottom, Frank was waiting. "What do you think, Doc?" Marcus looked up at the tower, 100 feet of steel reaching into the sky. "It's remarkable work, Frank." Frank nodded, squinted up at the platform. "Built 63 bridges in 30 years, he said. "Never built anything like this before." "Will it hold?" "It'll hold. Question is, you sure you want it to?" Marcus understood. The tower would hold the device steady, perform its function perfectly, then cease to exist. "Yes," Marcus said. "I'm sure." Frank spat in the dirt. "All right then. We built it right. What happens next is on you." Lyle Brennan climbed up behind Marcus. The young man wasn't even breathing hard. "This is where we'll assemble it," Marcus said. Lyle nodded, looked around, taking it all in. "They're building a shack," he said. "Right here on the platform. 12 by 12 feet. Canvas walls.
Air conditioning.
The core needs temperature control," Marcus said. "I know. I'll be working in there. Final assembly." Marcus looked at him. 24 years old, bright future ahead of him, and he'd volunteered for this. "You'll be making 300 trips up and down this ladder," Marcus said, "over the next 2 weeks." "Yes, sir." "Carrying plutonium, in pieces, assembling a nuclear weapon 100 feet in the air." "That's the job." A gust of wind made the platform sway. "You scared?" Marcus asked. Lyle considered the question seriously. "Yes, sir, but I think being scared keeps you careful, and careful keeps you alive." Smart kid, Marcus thought. They climbed back down together. By early July, the cable network was complete. Trenches radiating out from the tower base like spokes on a wheel. 3 feet deep, concrete-lined, hundreds of cables running through them, from the device to measurement stations positioned across the desert. 800 yards, 1,500 yards, 1 mile, 5 miles, 10 miles. Each station had cameras, pressure sensors, radiation detectors, all connected back to the tower through those buried cables. The cables themselves were specially shielded, protected against electrical interference, against the electromagnetic pulse that theory predicted would accompany the blast. No one had ever dealt with an electromagnetic pulse from a nuclear explosion before. The engineers were guessing. They overbuilt the shielding by a factor of 10 just to be safe. Marcus walked along one of the trenches with Roy. Perfect straight line, perfect concrete walls. The precision was remarkable. "Good work," Marcus said. Roy nodded. "Cable shielding is overbuilt. If the electromagnetic pulse is worse than theory predicts, we'll still be protected." "And if it's not as bad?" "Then we wasted some copper, better than losing the data." Marcus appreciated the practical wisdom. Roy thought like an engineer, not a theorist. Sometimes that was more valuable. On July 12th, the device arrived. The gadget, 10,000 pounds, spherical, covered in cables and detonator plugs, 32 points of initiation surrounding the plutonium core. It was hoisted to the top of the tower, suspended from the exact center point of the platform. Then the real work began. Assembly took 2 weeks. Lyle Brennan led the team, him and 3 other scientists, working in the wooden shack on top of the tower. July heat was merciless. The air conditioning struggled. Even with fans running constantly, temperatures inside the shack reached 90 degrees. The plutonium core had to be kept stable. The conventional explosives surrounding it were sensitive to heat. Every day, multiple trips up and down the ladder, carrying components, tools, checking measurements, precision work, 100 feet in the air, while desert winds howled and thunderstorms threatened in the distance. Marcus supervised from below. Radio communication to the platform. Verification of each step. The explosive lenses were the most critical part. 32 shaped charges arranged in a perfect sphere around the plutonium core. When detonated simultaneously, they would create an implosion wave, compressing the plutonium from the size of a softball to the size of a tennis ball in less than a microsecond. That compression would trigger the nuclear reaction, but only if the timing was perfect. 100 nanoseconds of error could cause the implosion to be asymmetric, could cause a fizzle instead of a detonation. The X-unit firing system was designed to handle this. 32 electrical circuits, synchronized to fire within a few hundred nanoseconds of each other. Roy's team had built it by hand, soldering components, testing, retesting. 200 tests before it was approved for use. Marcus had checked the mathematics himself. The circuit design was sound, but mathematics on paper and hardware in the desert were two different things. On July 14th, the assembly was complete. The gadget hung from the tower platform, fully armed. All 32 detonators connected, all circuits verified. Lyle Brennan climbed down for the last time that evening. He found Marcus at the base of the tower. "It's ready, sir." Marcus looked up at the tower, the wooden shack at the top, the sphere of metal and explosives suspended inside it. 18 months of his life, calculations, problems, solutions, all concentrated in that single device. "Good work, Lyle. Test is scheduled for 5:30 a.m., day after tomorrow," Lyle said, "weather permitting." "Weather forecast?" "Clear skies, calm winds, perfect conditions." Marcus nodded. He didn't believe in perfect conditions anymore. Not after 18 months of problems and setbacks and near failures. But maybe this once. "Get some rest," he told Lyle. "We've got a long 48 hours ahead." Lyle walked away toward the barracks. Marcus stayed, looking at the tower, silhouetted now against the evening sky. Somewhere in Washington, D.C., President Truman was preparing for the Potsdam Conference, meeting with Churchill and Stalin, negotiating the shape of the post-war world. Truman needed to know, did America have a working atomic weapon, or was it all theory and hope? General Harrison Stone had made that clear in his last visit. Direct orders from the president. Test by July 20th, before Potsdam concludes. The timeline was tight, but they'd made it. The tower stood ready. The device was armed. The measurement systems were in place. All they needed now was good weather and good luck. Marcus touched one of the steel support beams, still warm from the day's heat. "Don't fail me," he whispered to it. The tower didn't answer. The wind picked up, coming from the west, carrying the smell of distant rain. Marcus looked at the horizon. Storm clouds building over the mountains. That wasn't in the forecast. His stomach tightened. 48 hours. Everything could still go wrong. July 15th, 1945. 36 hours before detonation. The morning started clear, blue sky, light wind from the southwest. Temperature already climbing toward 100 degrees by 8 a.m. Perfect conditions. Marcus Whitfield stood at the South 10,000 bunker, 10,000 yards south of the tower, 2 miles of desert between him and ground zero. This would be the main observation point, the control center. Inside the bunker, technicians were making final checks. Street cameras positioned behind periscopes. Recording equipment tested and retested. Electrical systems verified. Everything ready. Marcus should have felt confident. He didn't. 20 years of scientific work had taught him one fundamental truth. The universe didn't care about human plans. Something always went wrong. The question wasn't if, the question was what. At the tower, Lyle Brennan supervised the final instrument placement. The device hung suspended from the platform, 32 detonators connected, each one wired to the X-unit firing system through redundant circuits. Around the device, they'd positioned diagnostic instruments, temperature sensors, pressure gauges, gamma-ray detectors. All of them would be destroyed in the first microsecond, but not before transmitting data. Lyle checked each connection personally, every cable, every circuit, 3 times. His hands were steady, no trembling, not anymore. 2 weeks of working 100 feet in the air with a nuclear device had cured him of visible fear. The fear was still there, deep inside, but he'd learned to work through it. "All circuits show green," he called down to the ground crew. Marcus's voice came back through the radio. "Verify the firing sequence one more time." Lyle pulled out his checklist, went through it step by step. 32 detonators, each one connected to the X-unit through shielded cables running down the tower and into the buried trenches. The X-unit itself was in a separate bunker 500 yards south, protected, temperature-controlled. When the countdown reached 0, the X-unit would discharge, sending precisely timed electrical pulses through all 32 circuits simultaneously. The pulses had to arrive within 100 nanoseconds of each other, 100 billionths of a second. Any more delay and the implosion would be asymmetric. The plutonium would compress unevenly. The chain reaction would fizzle instead of explode. Lyle had done the calculations himself, checked them against Marcus's work. Both of them arrived at the same answer. 100 nanoseconds tolerance, no more. Firing sequence verified, Lyle said. All detonators show proper continuity. Good, come down, we're done for the day. Lyle took one last look at the device. Spherical, metallic, covered in cables and connectors. It looked almost peaceful. Hard to believe this thing could vaporize everything within a mile. He climbed down the ladder, 100 feet of steel rungs. His arms and legs moved automatically now, muscle memory. At the bottom, Marcus was waiting. Weather forecast came in, Marcus said. And? Clear skies tomorrow, light winds, humidity below 50%. Perfect conditions. That's what they say. Something in Marcus's tone made Lyle look at him more carefully. You don't believe it? Marcus glanced at the western horizon. Clouds were building over the mountains, still distant, but growing. I believe the mathematics, Marcus said. I believe the engineering. But weather? He shook his head. Weather does what it wants. By 6 p.m., the storm was visible. Dark clouds rolling in from the west, lightning flickering inside them, thunder rumbling across the desert. Captain Ryan Mitchell, the weather officer, set up his equipment in the main camp. Barometric pressure readings, wind speed, humidity. He'd predicted clear skies. The storm wasn't supposed to be here. Marcus found him studying teletype reports from weather stations across the southwest. Talk to me, Captain. Mitchell didn't look up from his papers. Low pressure system moved faster than predicted. Coming in from California. Should have stayed north. Didn't. Will it hit us? Already is, sir. As if to punctuate his words, lightning struck a ridge 3 miles away. The crack of thunder followed seconds later. When will it clear? Marcus asked. Mitchell studied his charts. Best guess? 4, maybe 5 a.m.? Then we'll have a window. Maybe an hour before the next system moves in. Maybe? Weather's not mathematics, Dr. Whitfield. It's chaos with patterns. I can see the patterns, but chaos does what it wants. Marcus looked out at the approaching storm. Rain was already falling in grey sheets across the desert. The tower stood alone against the darkening sky. 100 feet of steel. The tallest structure for 50 miles. A perfect lightning rod. Oh God, Marcus whispered. He ran to find General Harrison Stone. The general was in the command tent, reviewing schedules with his staff. He looked up as Marcus burst in. We have a problem, Marcus said. The storm. I know, Mitchell briefed me. It's not just the storm, it's the tower. Stone frowned. The tower's solid. Frank's crew built it to withstand. It's a lightning rod, Marcus interrupted. 100 feet of steel, the tallest thing for miles. If lightning strikes it while the device is armed... He didn't need to finish. Stone's expression went flat. The detonators. Electrical detonators. A direct lightning strike could trigger them. Premature detonation of the conventional explosives, which would scatter plutonium across half of New Mexico. No nuclear explosion, just radioactive contamination. Site unusable. All our measurements worthless. Stone was quiet for a moment. Can we postpone? Potsdam, Marcus said. You told me yourself. President needs to know before... I know what I said. Can we postpone? Marcus thought about it. The device was armed, fully assembled. Taking it apart would take days. Reassembly would take more days. Testing everything again. And they'd still have the same problem next time weather threatened. We need to ground the tower, Marcus said. Tonight. We didn't build grounding into the design. I know. Weather forecast said clear skies. We didn't think we'd need it. Can it be done? In time? Marcus didn't know, but he said yes anyway, because there was no other choice. By 9 p.m., the rain had started. Not heavy yet, just scattered drops. But the lightning was getting closer. Marcus assembled every electrician on the base, 15 men. Army engineers who'd wired the cables and the firing circuits and all the delicate electronics. Roy Henderson stood at the front, the natural leader. They gathered in a work tent, Rain drumming on the canvas roof. Marcus explained the problem. "We need to ground the tower. Copper stakes driven deep, cables connecting tower to ground, has to disperse lightning charge safely." Roy raised his hand. "Sir, if we ground the tower, we might drain charge from the firing circuits. The X unit needs precise voltage. Grounding could bleed it off." Marcus had already thought of that. "Isolation transformers," he said, "between the tower ground and the firing circuit ground. Keeps them separate." "We don't have isolation transformers." "We'll build them. You've got 8 hours." Roy stared at him. "Sir, with respect, we've never built this configuration, never tested it." "I know. We could kill the firing circuits entirely, make the whole test impossible." "I know that too." Lightning struck close. The crack was immediate, maybe half a mile away. The lights in the tent flickered. "We test it when?" Roy asked. 3 a.m. That gives us 2.5 hours before the detonation window." "And if the test fails?" Marcus met his eyes. "Then we've got 2.5 hours to fix it." Roy looked at his crew, tired men. They'd been working for weeks straight, long days in brutal heat, now an all-nighter, in a thunderstorm, working with live electrical systems. "All right," Roy said, "we'll do it." The work was brutal. Copper stakes had to be driven 20 feet deep, 4 of them, positioned around the tower base. The ground was softer from the rain. That helped, but the lightning made every moment terrifying. Men worked in rubber boots, rubber gloves. Every time lightning struck nearby, they'd stop, wait, then continue. Grounding cables had to be run from each stake to the tower structure, heavy-gauge copper, firmly attached, but not so firmly that it would interfere with the tower's structural integrity. Marcus watched from a safe distance, unable to help. His expertise was theory, not field work. These men knew what they were doing. At midnight, the grounding system was complete. Now came the harder part, the isolation transformers. Roy and 2 specialists worked in a small bunker, protected from the rain, surrounded by electrical components. They had to hand-wire transformers that would allow lightning charge to flow into the ground while keeping the firing circuits isolated and functional. The mathematics was Marcus's domain. He provided calculations, voltage requirements, inductance values. Roy translated those into physical components, wire gauges, core sizes, winding patterns. 2 a.m. Still not done. The rain was heavier now, thunder constant, lightning striking every few minutes. Marcus paced outside the bunker, smoking cigarettes he'd bummed from a private. He didn't usually smoke, but tonight was different. Inside the bunker, Roy's hands moved steadily, soldering connections, testing with a multimeter, adjusting, testing again. 3 a.m. Roy emerged, holding a device the size of a car battery, covered in wires. "Best I can do, sir." "Will it work?" "Only one way to find out." They installed it, connected the tower grounding system to one side, the firing circuits to the other. Then Roy brought up a high-voltage generator, military surplus, designed for testing electrical systems. "This simulates a lightning strike," he said. "Not as powerful as the real thing, but close enough." He looked at Marcus. "If this works, the grounding system disperses the charge. If it fails, we might blow every circuit in the firing system." "Do it," Marcus said. Roy threw the switch. The generator hummed, built up charge, then discharged with a sharp crack. For a moment, nothing. Then Roy checked his instruments. Grounding system took the hit. Firing circuit show green, all green. Marcus exhaled. He hadn't realized he'd been holding his breath. "All 32 circuits?" Roy checked again, methodically, every single one. "All 32, we're good." The rain chose that moment to intensify, pouring down. Visibility dropped to almost nothing, but the tower was grounded. The firing circuits were protected. They'd solved the problem, except for one detail. Someone had to stay with the device, through the storm, ready to disconnect the firing circuits if lightning threatened directly. A fail-safe, human judgment in case the grounding system wasn't enough. General Stone made it clear, this wasn't optional. Someone climbed that tower, stayed in the wooden shack, monitored the instruments, had authority to abort if necessary. "I'll do it," Lyle Brennan said. Marcus looked at him, 24 years old, exhausted from 2 weeks of assembly work. "Lyle, you don't have to." "Yes, sir, I do. I know the device better than anyone. I can troubleshoot if something goes wrong, and—" He paused. "I put it together. If anyone's going to babysit it, it should be me." Marcus wanted to argue, but Lyle was right. "It's going to be a long night," Marcus said. "I know. If lightning strikes close, you disconnect. Understood?" "Understood. You'll have a telephone line, direct to this bunker. Any problems, you call immediately." "Yes, sir." They gave him supplies, sandwiches, thermos of coffee, flashlight, technical manuals, a direct phone line in a weatherproof case. At 10 p.m., Lyle climbed the tower. In the rain, in the dark, lightning illuminating the steel structure in brief, stark flashes. 100 feet up, into the wooden shack where 10,000 pounds of nuclear weapon waited. Hour 1. Lyle sat on a folding chair in the shack, canvas walls rippling in the wind, rain pounding the roof. The device hung in front of him, silent, inert. But not really inert. The plutonium core was radioactive, always emitting particles, always dangerous. He brought a radiation detector, set it on the workbench. The clicking was steady. Background radiation. Normal levels. Thunder rolled constantly. Lightning strikes were getting closer. He counted them, 24 in the first hour. The telephone rang. Marcus's voice. "Status. All systems nominal. Device temperature stable. No electrical anomalies." "Good. Call if anything changes." "Will do." Hour 2. Midnight. The storm intensified. Wind gusting hard enough to make the tower sway. Lyle could feel it, the platform moving beneath him, just half an inch. But at 100 feet in the air, that movement felt enormous. The device swayed too, suspended from its mounting point, cables flexing slightly, still within tolerance, but unsettling. Lightning struck the ridge a mile away. The flash was blinding even through the canvas walls. Thunder arrived instantly, a physical force, pressure wave hitting the shack. Lyle flinched. His hand moved to the disconnect switch. A red handle mounted on the wall. Pull it, and the firing circuits would be severed. Device safe from premature detonation, but also unable to detonate on command. Test would be scrubbed. He didn't pull it, not yet. Hour 3. 2 a.m. The rain became a deluge, water running down through gaps in the canvas. Lyle's shirt was soaked, his hands cold despite the July night. He drank coffee from the thermos. Bitter and too strong, but it helped. The radiation detector kept clicking, steady rhythm, almost comforting. He thought about his brother, the Marine, fighting somewhere in the Pacific, island hopping, brutal combat against an enemy that wouldn't surrender. How many Marines had died? Thousands, tens of thousands. If this weapon worked, maybe the dying would stop. Maybe his brother would come home. That thought kept him in the chair, in the shack, 100 feet up, in a thunderstorm, with a nuclear device. Worth the risk. Hour 4, 3 a.m. Lightning struck close, very close, maybe 500 yards. The flash lit up the entire desert. Thunder simultaneous with the flash. The shock wave hit the tower. The device's instruments flickered. Voltage spike on the electrical panel. Lyle's hand grabbed the disconnect switch, held it, waited. The instruments stabilized. Voltage returned to normal. The grounding system had worked. Roy's midnight engineering had saved the test. Lyle released the switch. His heart was pounding, hands shaking now. He called Marcus. "Lightning strike. Close one." Instruments flickered but recovered. "You all right?" "Yes, sir. Device is stable. If you need to come down—" "I'm staying." Marcus was quiet for a moment. "You're doing good work, son." "Thank you, sir." Hour 5, 4 a.m. The rain began to ease. Lightning moving east. Thunder more distant. Lyle stood, stretched. Looked out through a gap in the canvas. The sky was clearing. Stars visible through breaks in the clouds. The storm was passing. Captain Mitchell's prediction had been accurate. 4 a.m. Window opening. The telephone rang. Lyle, it's Marcus. Weather officer confirms clear window from 5 to 5:45 a.m. We're proceeding with the test. Understood. Final detonation time is 5:30 a.m. That's 90 minutes from now. I'll perform final checks. Then come down. We need you in the bunker for the countdown. Yes, sir. Lyle went through the checklist one more time. Every circuit, every connection, every instrument, all green. The device was ready. Hour 6. 4:30 a.m. Lyle climbed down the tower for the last time. The ladder was wet, slippery. He moved carefully, hand over hand, foot by foot. At the bottom, Marcus was waiting with a jeep. How are you? Tired, wet, but fine. You stayed up there for 7 hours. Had to be done. Marcus looked at him.
Really looked at him. This kid had climbed a tower in a thunderstorm, sat alone with a nuclear weapon, trusted the engineering, made decisions that could have scrubbed the entire test, and he'd done it perfectly. When this is over, Marcus said, I'm recommending you for a commendation. Not necessary, sir. It's necessary. They drove back to south 10,000. The sky was clearing rapidly now, stars bright, moon setting. In the east, the first hint of dawn. 4:45 a.m., 45 minutes to detonation. Inside the bunker, final preparations were underway. Scientists putting on welding goggles, multiple layers of dark glass, protection against the flash that would be 1,000 times brighter than the sun, even at 2 miles distance. The firing sequence was automated now. No more human decisions, no more checks. Everything was programmed, timed, synchronized. T-minus 30 minutes. Dr. Theodore Cram, a physicist from Columbia, was applying suntan lotion to his face and arms. People stared at him. What? Cram said. I calculated the radiation exposure. At this distance, there's a non-zero chance of radiation sunburn. It's dark outside, someone said. Won't be in 30 minutes. Cram finished applying the lotion, set it down. You all think I'm crazy, but when you're sunburned tomorrow and I'm not, remember this moment. Nervous laughter. Dr. Nathan Sterling, youngest physicist on the team, made an announcement. I'm watching from the truck. What? Marcus said. The truck, outside. I want to see it directly. The windshield will filter ultraviolet radiation, probably. That's reckless. That's observation. I didn't come to the desert to hide in a bunker. Marcus wanted to forbid it, but Sterling was civilian, free to make his own choices. Stupid choices, but his own. Don't come crying to me if you go blind, Marcus said. Sterling grinned. Fair enough. T-minus 20 minutes. The automated sequence began. Red lights on the control panel. Counting down. From this point forward, aborting required physically cutting cables at the tower. Impossible to do safely now. They were committed. T-minus 10 minutes. General Stone entered the bunker, stood next to Marcus. Doctor. General. Everything we've built, Stone said quietly. All the work, all the resources, all for this moment. Yes, sir. Stone looked at the control panel, the countdown clock. What happens if it fails? Marcus had thought about that question for 18 months. If it fails, we've learned something. We'll modify the design, test again. And if it succeeds? Marcus didn't answer. Because if it succeeded, everything changed. War, peace, power, the fundamental nature of human conflict. The world would never be the same. T-minus 5 minutes. Everyone was silent now, watching the countdown clock, red numbers descending. Outside, the sky was lightening, dawn approaching. T-minus 2 minutes. Marcus thought about the tower, 100 feet of steel, built by Frank and his crew, wired by Roy and his electricians, men with calloused hands and practical knowledge. They'd built something perfect, something that would last exactly as long as it needed to. T-minus 1 minute. Lyle Brennan stood next to Marcus, the young man who'd stayed up all night in a thunderstorm, who trusted the engineering, who'd done his job perfectly. Here we go, Marcus whispered. T-minus 30 seconds. Someone started counting aloud. Others joined in. 20, 19, 18. 18 months of Marcus's life. Calculations, problems, solutions, failures narrowly avoided, all converging on this moment. 10, 9, 8. The tower standing alone in the desert, holding 10,000 pounds, waiting. 5, 4, 3. Marcus gripped the wooden post. 2, 1. The world held its breath. 0. 5:29 and 45 seconds. Mountain wartime. The X unit fired. An electrical pulse travelled through buried cables at nearly the speed of light, from the firing bunker to the tower, through 3 feet of earth, through concrete conduits, through specially shielded wiring. 2 miles in a fraction of a heartbeat. 32 detonators received the signal, within 100 nanoseconds of each other, perfectly synchronized. In the bunker, Marcus Whitfield saw nothing. The welding goggles were too dark. Everything was black through the multiple layers of protective glass. But he felt it. A pressure. A presence. Like the air itself changed. Then light. Not ordinary light. Light that existed beyond description, beyond experience, beyond anything natural to Earth. White. Pure white. Brighter than 1,000 suns concentrated into a single point. Even through the welding goggles, even with his eyes closed, even facing away from the blast, Marcus saw it. Saw it through his eyelids, through bone, through everything. The light of creation, or destruction, or both. Microsecond 0. The 32 explosive lenses detonated simultaneously. Not an explosion outward, an explosion inward. Implosion. Each lens was a shaped charge, designed to focus the blast wave toward the center, toward the plutonium sphere suspended in the middle. 32 shock waves converged, traveling inward at more than 1 mile per second. The mathematics of it was beautiful. Marcus had spent months calculating the precise angles, the exact timing, the perfect symmetry required. Now those calculations became reality. The shock waves met at the plutonium core, compressed it. Microsecond 1. The plutonium sphere shrank, from the size of a softball to the size of a tennis ball. Volume decreased. Density increased by a factor of 2.5. The atoms were packed together so tightly that neutrons could no longer escape. They collided with neighboring atoms instead. The first neutron split a plutonium atom, released energy, released 2 more neutrons. Those 2 neutrons split 2 more atoms. 2 became 4. The chain reaction began. Microsecond 2. 4 neutrons became 8. 8 became 16. Temperature at the core exceeded 10 million degrees Celsius, hotter than the interior of the sun. The plutonium wanted to blow itself apart, wanted to expand, to escape the compression. But the implosion was still happening, still crushing inward, holding the reaction together, for exactly the amount of time needed. Microsecond 3. 16 collisions became 256. The temperature doubled again. At the base of the tower, the steel support beams began to vaporize. Not melt, vaporize. Solid metal transformed directly into superheated gas. The tower didn't fall, didn't collapse. It simply ceased to exist as a physical structure. Microsecond 4. 256 collisions became 65,536. The reaction entered runaway mode. Nothing could stop it now. The mathematics were inexorable, exponential. The plutonium core began to disassemble itself from internal pressure. But the damage was done. The chain reaction was cascading. Microsecond 5. Over 1 million atoms had fissioned. The energy released equaled 5,000 tons of TNT. But the reaction was still accelerating. The implosion could no longer contain it. The plutonium sphere exploded outward. Microsecond 6. The final cascade. Every remaining atom that could fission did fission. In a single instant. Total yield 22 kilotons. 22,000 tons of TNT equivalent.
released in 6 millionths of a second.
The concrete foundation liquefied, turned to molten slag. The wooden pilings that Frank's crew had driven 20 feet into the desert floor carbonized, became ash, disappeared. The steel tower was already gone. Now everything else went too. The wooden shack, the air conditioning units, the cables, the instruments, the device itself. All consumed, all transformed into energy and light and heat beyond measure. Millisecond 1/1000th of a second after detonation. The fireball had expanded to 200 feet in diameter. Temperature inside, 2 million degrees Celsius. The shock wave traveled outward at 7,000 miles per hour. Faster than rifle bullets, faster than most explosions. This wasn't wind. This was a wall of compressed air with mass and momentum and destructive power independent of heat or radiation. At the South 10,000 bunker, 2 miles away, there was still silence. Sound traveled slower than light. Marcus stood frozen, eyes still closed behind the goggles, waiting. The light continued, brilliant white fading to orange, to red. Then the sound arrived. Not a sound, a physical force. Crack, like thunder directly overhead, except 1,000 times louder. The concrete bunker shook, the floor vibrated. Dust fell from the ceiling. Someone screamed, cut off immediately, embarrassed. The shockwave passed, continued outward, rolling across the desert like an invisible tsunami. Marcus opened his eyes, pulled off the goggles. Through the bunker's observation slit, he could see it. The fireball, rising, growing, a sphere of incandescent gas climbing into the dawn sky. 2,000 feet in diameter now, still expanding. Orange and red and purple. Colors that shouldn't exist together, colors that hurt to look at. And beneath it, where the tower had stood, nothing. Just empty desert. Marcus felt tears on his face. He'd done it. They'd done it. The theory worked. The engineering worked. Everything worked. Jesus Christ, someone whispered behind him. Marcus turned. General Stone stood there, face pale, eyes wide. "We really did it," Stone said. "Yes. We've become death." Marcus didn't respond, because Stone was right. 2 seconds after detonation, the fireball reached its maximum diameter, 2,000 feet. Then, something extraordinary happened. Hot air rises. That's basic physics. A sphere of gas at 2 million degrees rises very quickly. The fireball became buoyant, lifted off the ground, ascending at 300 feet per second. As it rose, it pulled desert sand and debris with it, creating a column, a stalk connecting the rising sphere to the ground. The mushroom cloud. Marcus had predicted this, calculated it, drew sketches of what it would look like. But seeing it was different. The cloud climbed. 1,000 feet, 2,000, 5,000. A pillar of fire and smoke and pulverized earth rising into the pre-dawn sky. Beautiful and terrible. Lyle Brennan stood next to Marcus at the observation slit. "I spent 2 weeks assembling that device," Lyle said quietly. "Put it together piece by piece. Knew every component, every circuit." He paused. "Now it's just gone." "Not gone," Marcus said. "Transformed." They watched the mushroom cloud climb higher. 10,000 feet, 20,000, 30,000. By 7 minutes after detonation, it had reached 38,000 feet, over 7 miles high. Marcus did quick calculations in his head. Rise rate, expansion, thermal dynamics. 22 kilotons, he said. What? The yield, based on the cloud height and rise rate, approximately 22 kilotons. Lyle looked at him, then back at the cloud. "We predicted 15 to 20 kilotons. The implosion design was more efficient than we thought." Someone else in the bunker started clapping, slowly at first. Then others joined in. Applause, cheers, men hugging each other, celebrating. Marcus didn't celebrate. He just watched the cloud, rising, spreading, flattening at the top as it hit the temperature inversion layer. A perfect mushroom shape, the signature of the atomic age. 2 hours later, the film from the street cameras was developed. Marcus stood in a makeshift darkroom, watching the images emerge on the photographic plates. 10 million frames per second, the first 3 milliseconds of the explosion, captured before the camera's periscopes were destroyed. The images showed the fireball's birth, the expansion, the shockwave propagation. But there was something else, an asymmetry, very slight, only visible in the first 200 microseconds. One side of the fireball expanded marginally faster than the other. Marcus leaned closer, measured the difference with calipers, 0.03 inches on the photographic plate. Translated to the actual explosion, about 2 feet of difference in the fireball radius, caused by one of the explosive lenses detonating approximately 100 nanoseconds ahead of the others. His stomach tightened. A timing error. The exact problem they'd spent months trying to eliminate. Lyle was studying the images too. "One of the detonators was early," he said. "I see it. Should have caused a fizzle. Asymmetric compression. Uneven chain reaction." "Should have," Marcus agreed, "but it didn't." Marcus traced the images forward, frame by frame. The asymmetry appeared in the first few frames, then smoothed out. The fireball became symmetric again. By microsecond 6, it was perfectly spherical. "The explosive lenses," Marcus said. "They were thick enough to forgive the timing error. The converging shock waves smoothed out the asymmetry before reaching the plutonium core." He sat back. "We designed forgiveness into the system, and it worked." Lyle smiled. First time Marcus had seen him smile in weeks. "We built it right." "Yes, we did." The images confirmed the yield calculation. 22 kilotons. Efficiency, approximately 15% of the plutonium had actually fissioned, higher than some predictions. The implosion design worked, which meant Fat Man, the combat version of this device, would work too. Marcus wrote a brief report, handed it to General Stone. "Send this to Washington, to the President." Stone read it, nodded. "He'll want to know immediately. Tell him the weapon is viable, combat ready. The test succeeded beyond expectations." Stone left to send the telegram. Marcus stayed in the darkroom, looking at the images. 6 microseconds of history, captured on film. The birth of something new, something terrible. 45 minutes after detonation, the recovery team approached Ground Zero. 3 Sherman tanks, modified with lead plating and air filtration systems, carrying scientists and engineers in protective gear. Marcus was in the lead tank. As they got closer, he could see the crater. Except it wasn't really a crater, more like a shallow depression. 6 feet deep, 130 feet across. The desert sand had been transformed, turned into glass, jade green glass, smooth, glossy, reflecting the morning sun. The tank stopped. Marcus climbed out, wearing protective gear, dosimeter clicking steadily. Radiation levels were elevated, about 5 times normal background. Not immediately dangerous for short exposure, but enough to be careful. He walked to the edge of the glass. Trinitite, that's what they'd call it later, formed when silica sand melted at 3,000 degrees Celsius, then resolidified almost instantly. Marcus knelt, touched it, still slightly warm. The green color came from trace elements in the sand, copper, iron, other minerals fused into the glass during those microseconds of extreme heat. Behind him, other scientists were taking samples, measuring radiation, documenting everything. But Marcus just stared. This was where the tower had stood, where Frank's crew had driven pilings, poured concrete, built something perfect, where Lyle had spent 2 weeks assembling a nuclear device 100 feet in the air. All gone now, except the glass. The glass would remain, a permanent marker, a scar on the desert, proof that humans had touched the power of the sun and survived. The first unexpected discovery came 30 minutes into the survey. Steel fragments, large pieces, some weighing over 50 pounds, found up to 1,200 yards from Ground Zero. Marcus examined one. Twisted metal, one side melted smooth, the other side rough, pockmarked. The tower wasn't supposed to leave fragments,
one engineer said. I know. We predicted complete vaporization within 500 yards. Marcus turned the steel piece over in his hands. The predictions were based on direct thermal exposure, he said.
But the shock wave arrived simultaneously with the heat. He pointed to the smooth side. This side faced the fireball. Flash heated, began to vaporize. Then to the rough side. This side was blown away from the fireball so quickly it didn't have time to completely vaporize. The shock wave saved it by removing it from the heat source. The engineer made notes. Implications for weapon design? Future bombs need to account for fragmentation patterns. Steel doesn't always behave as predicted under these conditions. This data would later influence predictions of urban destruction, of how buildings would fail, what would survive. Practical information bought with the vaporization of one steel tower in the New Mexico desert. The second discovery involved the concrete foundation. It hadn't completely liquefied as predicted. Instead, it had been compressed and fractured into massive chunks. The largest piece weighed over 2 tons, and it was harder than before the explosion. An engineer ran compression tests, calculated the density. The extreme pressure actually increased the concrete's structural integrity, he reported. It's been compressed at the molecular level, denser, stronger. Marcus filed that information away. Decades later, it would contribute to the development of pre-stressed concrete, used in nuclear reactor containment buildings, in structures designed to withstand extreme forces, knowledge born from destruction. The third discovery was the cable trenches, those perfect straight lines radiating from ground zero, 3 feet deep, concrete-lined. The measurement instruments at the ends of these trenches had been destroyed, but instruments at equivalent distances in other directions had survived. Marcus walked along one trench, studied the damage pattern. Then he understood. The trenches acted as gun barrels, he said. The other scientists looked at him. The shock wave traveled down these trenches like a bullet down a rifle barrel, focused, accelerated. The concrete walls channeled the force. He gestured to the destroyed instruments. These received 2 to 3 times the overpressure of instruments at the same distance, but not aligned with a trench. It was an accidental-shaped charge, the same principle used in anti-tank weapons, explosive force focused and directed through geometry. Roy had built those trenches to protect cables. Instead, he'd accidentally created a focusing mechanism. Underground structures near nuclear blasts need to account for this, Marcus said. Linear tunnels can become death traps, channeling shock waves, amplifying them. More data, more lessons, written in destroyed equipment and shattered concrete. 800 yards from ground zero, they found the jumbo, the massive steel container, 214 tons, $12 million, the backup plan they hadn't needed. It had been knocked over, stripped of some exterior plating, but the main vessel was intact, dented, scorched, but intact. General Stone stood next to it, hand on the steel. We were going to use this to contain the plutonium if the test fizzled, he said. Yes. Wright said we wouldn't need it. He was confident the implosion would work. He was right. Stone looked at the jumbo, then back toward ground zero. But this survived, at 800 yards. Yes, which means structures designed properly can survive close to a nuclear blast. Marcus nodded. This data would be studied, analyzed, used to design bunkers during the Cold War, shelters, hardened facilities. The jumbo had served a purpose after all, just not the one originally intended. 4 days after the test, July 20th, Marcus sat in a temporary office, writing his final report. Test successful. Yield 22 kilotons. Efficiency 15%. Implosion design validated. All systems performed within acceptable parameters. Recommend Fat Man weapon cleared for combat deployment. He signed it, dated it, set down his pen. General Stone entered. The President has been briefed. Potsdam Conference is underway. Stalin has been informed that America possesses a weapon of extraordinary power. Marcus said nothing. Fat Man will be loaded on a B-29 next week.
Destination, Japan. I know. Stone sat down across from Marcus. You did good work here, Doctor. Historic work. Thank you. History will remember Trinity as the birth of the atomic age. Marcus looked out the window, at the desert, at the distant mountains. Maybe, he said. Or maybe history will remember it as something else. What? The day we proved we could build anything, no matter how terrible, no matter how powerful. If the mathematics work and the engineering is sound, we can make it real. He turned back to Stone. I don't know if that's something to celebrate. Stone stood, walked to the door, paused. My job is winning wars, Doctor. Your job is making sure the weapons work. We both did our jobs. He left. Marcus sat alone. Outside, construction crews were already dismantling the observation bunkers, packing equipment, preparing to leave. In 3 weeks, this site would be mostly abandoned, fenced off, declared restricted. The tower was gone. The device was gone. Soon the people would be gone too. All that would remain was the glass, Trinitite, and the knowledge of what had been done here. August 9th, 1945, Nagasaki, Japan. Fat Man detonated at 11:02 a.m. local time, 22 kilotons, exactly as Trinity had demonstrated. The implosion design worked in combat exactly as it had worked in the test. The war ended 6 days later. Marcus heard the news in his office at Los Alamos. Lyle Brennan was there with him. We did it, Lyle said. We ended the war. Marcus didn't respond immediately. He was thinking about the tower, the steel beams, the concrete foundation, Frank's crew, Roy's electricians, men who had built something perfect. We built a weapon, Marcus said finally. Other men decided how to use it. But it worked. It ended the war. My brother is coming home. Marcus looked at him. I'm glad your brother is safe, Lyle, truly. But we've opened a door we can't close. This technology exists now. Other countries will build their own bombs, maybe better bombs, maybe worse ones. He gestured at the window, at Los Alamos, at the laboratories and workshops. We've changed warfare forever, made it possible to destroy entire cities in microseconds, and I don't know if humanity is ready for that responsibility. Lyle was quiet for a moment. Neither do I, he said. But we can't uninvent it. No, we can't. Marcus Whitfield returned to Harvard in 1946, resumed teaching, publishing, theoretical work. But he never worked on weapons again. Frank went back to building bridges, 40 more years of work, 64 bridges across the American Southwest. He died in 1987. His obituary mentioned the bridges, never mentioned Trinity. Roy became a nuclear safety engineer, designed containment systems for peaceful reactors, ensured that the next generation of nuclear technology would be as safe as human engineering could make it. He died in 1991. Lyle Brennan stayed in nuclear research, but focused on applications, medical isotopes, power generation, peaceful uses. When asked about his night in the thunderstorm on top of the tower, he always said the same thing. I was just doing my job, trusting the engineering. Someone had to stay. It happened to be me. He died in 2008. Samuel Wright became known as the father of the atomic bomb. Famous, celebrated, then controversial. He famously quoted the Bhagavad Gita after Trinity. Now I am become death, the destroyer of worlds. The quote defined him, haunted him. He died in 1967. General Harrison Stone continued military service, oversaw more nuclear testing, retired as a 4-star general. He never publicly expressed regret about Hiroshima or Nagasaki. We saved American lives, he said. That was my duty. He died in 1982. Trinity Site today, open to visitors twice per year, April and October. The crater has mostly filled in with wind-blown sand and erosion, but traces of trinitite remain, embedded in the desert, jade-green glass catching the sunlight. A stone obelisk marks where the tower stood, black lava rock, simple, dignified. A plaque reads, Trinity site, where the world's first nuclear device was exploded on July 16, 1945. No other information, no names, no details, no explanation, just the date and the fact. Radiation levels are still elevated, about 10 times normal background, safe for short visits, but measurable. The desert remembers. The legacy of Trinity extends far beyond nuclear weapons. The streak camera technology pioneered for the test became the foundation for studying high-speed events, bullet impacts, industrial explosions, crash tests. Modern facilities use descendants of those cameras, digital now, but based on the same principles. The cable shielding techniques developed to protect against electromagnetic pulse evolved into EMP hardening, protecting electrical systems in hospitals, military installations, data centers. The timing synchronization challenges drove development of precision timing technology, led to atomic clocks, GPS systems, modern telecommunications requiring nanosecond accuracy across global distances. Even the structural engineering lessons had applications: pressure vessel design, chemical plant safety, explosion containment. But beyond specific technologies, Trinity established a methodology, engineering for the unprecedented. When facing completely novel challenges, the Trinity approach still applies. Theoretical calculation, conservative overbuilding, extensive instrumentation, acceptance that predictions will be imperfect. Build it right, measure everything, learn from the results. In his final interview before his death in 1982, Marcus Whitfield was asked what Trinity meant to him. He thought for a long moment. "People remember Trinity as the birth of the atomic age," he said. "I remember the tower, 100 feet of steel, built by men whose names aren't in history books. Frank and his crew, Roy and his electricians, Lyle staying up all night in a thunderstorm. The tower stood for 3 weeks, performed perfectly for 1 millisecond. That's not luck, that's engineering. I designed Trinity, but those men built it with their hands, made the impossible real. That's what I remember. July 16th, 1945, 5:29 and 45 seconds. The 100-foot steel tower ceased to exist in 6 microseconds, but its legacy endures. Not in the weapon it tested, in the proof that humans can build anything, if the mathematics is sound, the engineering is precise, and the people doing the work know what they're doing. The tower that vanished in 1 millisecond and changed the world forever.